Be advised, there is a platoon reportedly coming in from the west.
I think we can call it platoon minus now.
Yep.
Greetings, this is dslyecxi and welcome to Hindsight. In this one, we're going to deviate a bit from the pattern that's been established. I'll be talking about what it's like to plan out a scenario as a platoon commander, as well as the thought process behind various decisions I made during a mission that I was platoon commanding. We'll also go over a neat situation that developed during the close of this mission. The mission concept was that we would be doing a clear through 5 suspected enemy locations, looking to recapture looted weapons and vehicles. The start of this mission's planning phase had a minor audible called by the admin, Cappy, where instead of destroying caches and vehicles in place, we'd need to collect them and keep them safe somewhere while the mission played out. The forces I had available included an entire infantry platoon, an extra squad, Delta, a logistics member in his truck, and 2 Hind attack helicopters in support, which were call signs Orzel 1 and 2. Given the requirement for retrieving the caches and vehicles, I decided that Delta Squad would act as a security element for logistics. They could both protect the logistics team during travel to and from different sites, as well as help crew any vehicles that would need to be recovered. The base I'd have the logistics team operating from would be a mosque near our first objective. The high walls would make it easier for a small force to defend, and the roomy interior meant we could fit more than a few vehicles in there in a protected fashion. Creating the initial plan was an example of how to rapidly plan during a potentially lengthy mission. The only objective that mattered at the start would be Objective India, the first one, and it alone would probably be at least 20 minutes worth of effort to go through. By planning for India first, I could get everyone into action sooner and worry about the next phase of the operation while they were busy doing their platoon level clear. Splitting up India was a matter of ensuring that each squad had an appropriate task given its size. I designated the central portion as being Alpha and Bravo's responsibility, with clear lanes for each squad, then set Delta and Charlie as security elements that would both search their areas, as well as screen Alpha and Bravo's flanks. We'd have at least 2 armed MRAPs per squad as well, giving us good mobility and firepower. We were also going to be carrying 2 fire team and 1 medical crate per squad, giving us the ability to resupply ourselves to an extent. It's worth pointing out that this was discussed with a logistics player, Morrow, because we didn't want to take away from their experience by negating the need for resupply. Elijah, I don't want to step on your toes, so you make the call on that.
Honestly, if I'm gonna be transferring like around caches of shit we're finding, it would probably be better if we had inborn squad-based resupply.
Given that Laji was going to have other things to occupy them, such as hauling weapon caches and supporting that side of the operation, we agreed that carrying our own resupply wouldn't take away from Laji's experience. Okay, so bring, let's say, 2 fire team so that you have the AT and then medical per squad. I started briefing at 8 minutes into safe start and finished after 4 minutes. Cool. Well, that's all I've got. For now. Go brief your squads, I guess.
I guess.
If you have to. If you want them to have an idea what's about to happen. The squad leaders went to do their squad briefs, pull their vehicles, and assemble the convoy. And at 22 minutes, the mission went live. Having good squad leaders as a platoon commander means that you don't have to worry about the squad level details for the most part. Once given their lanes and the intent of that phase, each squad leader was able to interpret that intent and do squad level planning like where to dismount, how to manage their vehicles, subdividing the lane between their fire teams, and more. Having these MRAPs was going to be helpful in this terrain. Their armor meant they'd at least be somewhat resilient to enemy fire, but most importantly, their tall size and machine guns meant that they could provide good overwatch for the dismounted troops. This would include being able to look and shoot over walls that shorter vehicles like Humvees would have struggled with. Given the types of buildings and walls in this region, this would be a big factor. They'd also have extra seating in them, meaning that losing a vehicle wouldn't be crippling. As the headquarters element, I'd also have an MRAP, which would give us an extra vehicle to use in the event that losses made it difficult to mount everyone up. I let Orzel 1 know right away that I wanted them scouting Juliet, the next objective to our north, which would help me plan how to move into the area most efficiently. 1, can you try and get a lot of eyes on the Juliet area, and so we don't have to go into that fucking nightmare of buildings?
Copy, will do.
With the platoon working to clear out the first objective, let me say a bit more on how and why lanes were set up for each phase. There are different ways to indicate where you want squads to travel or positions you want them to occupy, with pros and cons for each. In this mission, I didn't just need to tell squads where to go, I also had to assign them very clear sectors to search for the items, the vehicles and ammo caches that we were looking for. This meant that I needed to draw actual lanes for each squad so that they would understand exactly what they were responsible for, and so that the area between two squads wouldn't get overlooked due to each squad thinking that the other one was clearing a given area. The actual clearing of India went smoothly. Watching the squads interact with each other and demonstrate their technique for achieving my stated intent gave me a good sense of how they'd handle for the coming objectives. Things seemed to be starting off on the right foot. Once we'd taken the mosque, I had Delta link up with Laji there and gave them their orders. Due to their understrength size and the vulnerability of the Laji truck itself, I informed both the Delta squad leader and the air elements that Delta would have priority tasking for CAS, and that air might need to escort Laji to and from the mosque at times. Air, come in.
Send.
We're doing an organization where Delta will be supporting Laji for this. They'll be independent of the platoon at times. They will have priority tasking for CAS.
Understood.
At this point, you're gonna have priority tasking for CAS as you're doing all of it. So feel free to hop on their net if you need them. If you need them to do route recon for you, or follow you back, or support you, or anything like that, you guys have priority. While I knew the session admin would keep Delta and Laji's role in mind and ensure they had things to do and not being tasked by me directly, I still let them know that if they weren't getting action, they should let me know so that I could help them to fix that. Delta, come in.
Go for Delta.
The idea is to make sure you guys get some action, so if it seems like it's pretty quiet, let me know.
Delta copies.
As I started considering how to move into Objective Juliet, one of the things that was on my mind was trying to ensure that each squad was able to do a variety of tasks over the course of the mission. For the sake of player enjoyment, you want to try to keep things interesting for everyone and avoid having one squad doing the same thing again and again, or missing out on stuff. For Juliet, I needed to keep the squads in the same relative positions as at India, so that, combined with the terrain of Juliet, meant that I couldn't offer too much variety yet. Still, I was able to change Alpha's task to a blocking one, and Charlie became responsible for screening the eastern side of Bravo from whatever position seemed most reasonable for them. With a movement into Objective Juliet in the near future, I again asked one of the Hinds to do a visual recon of it to see if they could locate anything that might indicate an asset of ours. After the Hinds reported the camo nets in Bravo's area, they became tasked with searching and clearing that area. This next phase is going to have Alpha securing the western area as marked. Bravo will be searching a large area where we've seen a camo net, and Charlie will be placing themselves east and acting as a screening element. Delta will be with Laji, acting as the asset recovery team. My tentative plan here was to use Alpha's position as a route through which the squads would move on to the next objective, but for the moment I was just watching to see how the objective would play out. All squads, we're moving into Phase 3 momentarily. I've marked a Phase 3 release point that's west of Alpha. The intent here is we'll have Bravo move through that to their screen, Charlie move through that to their clear, followed finally by Alpha moving through that to their secure. After a bit, Bravo had cleared through enough of the area for the recovery team to come in and do their job. They arrived, drove the BMP out, and then attempted to load the munitions crates. While trying this, they realized that it wasn't set up to permit such a thing. So I made an audible to change Laji's task from capturing munitions crates to instead just blowing them up in place.
There doesn't seem to be a way I can get her in the Vic. You want me to blow it?
So we got a tank, I'll mark it in a second, but we need you to hit it with an HGM, we're out.
Yes.
Alright, I'm gonna back
That'll
this
be
up.
your task for these things at this point if you can't actually move them.
Alright. Yeah, so I thought we would just be able to move it, but yeah.
This was a straightforward decision to make, since it meant Laji would still have a gameplay task relating to the crates, and it didn't really matter in the context whether the task was loading them or blowing them up. I didn't feel it was worth wasting the admin's time trying to figure out how to make them loadable. It didn't really matter. Morrow set the charges, and the recovery team headed back to their mosque staging area. With Juliet done, Objective Kilo was next. Due to the distance to it, I'd have an opportunity to shuffle the squads around if need be, but fortunately the layout of the objectives meant that I could accomplish my goal of giving squads a variety of taskings without needing to shuffle them otherwise at this point. I drew out the lanes, issued the orders, and had Bravo and Charlie move to the main road, then use it to drive up to and through Alpha, at which point they'd all split up to go to their different objectives. Charlie, which had cleared and screened outside of urban areas while Alpha and Bravo dealt with them previously, was now going to have the task of clearing an occupied fob and securing the vehicles and munitions located there. Alpha would again secure a position that we'd use to jump off into the next objective through, and Bravo became the screening element, covering one flank of the fob, as well as a large northwestern arc that included much of the area that we expected the enemy to be attacking from. The squad area responsibilities were proportional to the terrain they were located in, with Charlie's being narrowly focused on the fob, Bravo's much wider due to the open terrain around it and their tasking as a supporting element, and Alpha's moderately sized to facilitate control of that road network. Objective Kilo went fairly smoothly. The only thing that was really necessary to coordinate here was to get the recovery team to the fob early, then have Charlie and Air cover the northern part of the fob where the majority of contact was coming from, and the way that the recovery team would need to drive the BMPs out through.
Go for Oslo 1.
Can I get you covering the immediate north of this fob as Delta
Bravo
makes their
one,
BMP pickup?
Okay. Copy, will do. We've been watching that already.
Thanks. Delta, we have Orzo 1 supporting you on the northern side of that fob.
Copies. We're bringing our Vicks up now, and we'll have our runners go collect the Vicks.
As I was waiting for Delta to ferry the BMPs, I let the rest of the platoon know what the plan was to get everyone on the phase line to begin the next objective. This would involve having Bravo stay in place while Charlie withdrew past them, then Bravo would displace to the phase line, at which point all three squads could begin moving into Lima. All squads, once Charlie is in position at phase line 3, Alpha will begin moving into their clear, Bravo you'll swoop around, get to yours, and Charlie will begin theirs as well.
Alpha. Bravo. Charlie.
This movement basically meant that each squad was covered as they withdrew back to the phase line, and then all squads could push to the next objective together.
Vehicle now.
There are now 3 friendly BMPs moving out of the fob.
Advise BMPs are owned by friendlies. Technical contact.
Delta made it out with the BMPs smoothly, but since they'd taken them and finished their task before Laji was done rigging the crates with explosives, it meant I needed to assign one of the Hinds to escort Laji back to the mosque. Since this was what I had anticipated using Hinds for earlier, it was easy to make it happen. Laji's vehicle, they're by themselves right now, they'll be coming out of the fob momentarily. Can you escort them back to the mosque?
Can do.
Laji, you'll have an aerial escort on the way out of here, but get moving quick.
Possible man pads around here. Keep an eye out.
With Orzel 1 overwatching it, Laji was able to make it safely back to the mosque without incident. Delta had fortified it well, blocking entrances with MRAPs and positioning shooters on the surrounding walls. Next up, Objective Lima allowed me to give Alpha a lengthy clearing objective after having asked them to basically take and hold smaller positions in the previous 2 objectives. Charlie and Bravo would clear their own lanes to the side of that, and I took care to carefully restrict Charlie's sectors such that they wouldn't be drawn too far into clearing a rather extensive set of buildings bordering them past a specific north-south road. Lima ended up having a surprise for us. Alpha and Charlie's clears went fine, but Bravo ran into pretty heavy friction on the west as the outermost element of the clearing force. The enemy was now bringing more and heavier assets into play, to include tanks and anti-aircraft trucks. After a bit, Alpha and Charlie had cleared through their sectors, with Laji and Delta having arrived to support and resupply those squads. I was faced with the problem of trying to get Bravo back to us without having either Alpha or Bravo give up the train that they'd already cleared through. Bravo had the vehicle mobility to make a move, they just needed the situation to be right for that, and we weren't there yet. One of the Hinds came into support, only to be shot down by AAA after engaging a tank. At first it was thought that no one had survived the crash, but Bravo soon spotted a lone survivor limping away from the wreck. This was the gunner. This threw a wrench into our plans, as not only had we lost an important asset, we also now needed to recover a crew member who was out in enemy territory. Bravo squad lead, Brix, quickly organized a rescue force using his 2 MRAPs to rapidly move to, secure, and extract the survivor. Bravo consolidated in a construction site, using it as a fortification to hold off the oncoming enemy. We now had a decent gap between Bravo and the rest of the platoon, but the terrain made this less significant. Bravo was in a well-fortified position, Alpha was in an urban position, and the terrain between them was mostly open with little cover or concealment for the enemy to take advantage of. The surviving Hind, Orzel 1, was now fully committed to supporting Bravo. The tank threat made this a necessity, and Orzel 1 was able to keep them off of Bravo as they prepared to withdraw. I was faced with a decision here. With Alpha and Charlie having cleared their sectors and in the midst of being resupplied, I needed to assess what the next move would be. Holding them in place didn't seem wise since Bravo's remaining sector was mostly open area and wasn't going to need much of a thorough clear. Similarly, Bravo's slice of Objective Oscar also wasn't dense terrain, meaning that Alpha's flank wouldn't be too much concern if they moved ahead. I wasn't going to pressure Bravo to go faster since I knew the squad leader was reacting appropriately to the situation, and I was willing to let them continue to develop that fight as they needed to, while of course offering support if they needed it.
Copy, Bravo. Keep fighting for now. If it seems like breaking would be a good idea, let me know and do it.
Acknowledge. I'm observing about a platoon of enemy attacking from the westerly arc, closing within about 100 of my position. I've garrisoned the squad in a construction building. I'll be able to hold indefinitely here.
Correct copies. I decided that Alpha and Charlie would continue into Objective Oscar, with Bravo catching up as soon as they were able. This would keep the momentum going, something which seemed increasingly important as heavier threats were being brought to bear against us. Thanks to Orzel 1's support and the generally high mobility we had due to our MRAPs, I was confident that whatever happened, we'd be able to react to it appropriately. Charlie, Alpha, sit reps.
Alpha holding at the phase line, sporadic contact to the south. Still green on every front.
Charlie's holding defensive, resupplying.
Charlie, when you're done with your resupply, you and Alpha will step off into your next zones.
Charlie, top.
Yeah, coming in northeast.
Bravo called in that they were good to move, so I told them to continue through their lane to the phase line. I had been keeping my own MRAP with Apache as the gunner, positioned to provide some screening to the east of Bravo. Bravo's movement was again disrupted by a tank and infantry pushing them, causing them to take a moment to defeat those threats. Once that was done, Bravo announced that they'd be attempting a breakout. Orzel 1 kept Bravo updated on threats, noting that there was a T-72 on the way and that they had no ATGMs to hit it with. Instead, the Hind would make a gun and rocket pass on it before returning to base for rearming. I moved our MRAP closer to Alpha, while Logi planned to do a resupply of Bravo near their next phase line. Seeing this, I moved to support that, with Delta escorting Logi as well. As Bravo began to withdraw, the T-72 that had been called earlier was now heading towards Alpha. The lead Bravo team, seeing it pass right in front of them, hastily stopped and dismounted to attempt to get an AT shot on it. Unfortunately, it got out of range before they managed to, leaving them in a pretty precarious position. A tank had just driven into the area that they were trying to withdraw through, pretty decisively cutting them off. Meanwhile, Delta, Logi, and Command were coming over to assist Bravo's withdrawal. The T-72 had parked itself in a low area between our element and Bravo, and Delta spotted at the last second.
Delta has a T-72 about 100 meters to our west. We're backing up very slowly.
And dismounted people to try to hit it with AT, just as the T-72 began to move again. Bravo, now in squad strength and arrayed in an anti-tank ambush posture, began engaging with AT from the front, while Delta fired from the flank. The T-72 was driving straight into Bravo, firing as it went, as Bravo began firing AT back at it. Several of the Bravo AT members hit it frontally, and the tank seemed to become a firepower kill at this point, driving through Bravo and seemingly leaving the battlefield.
Charlie has finished our clear.
With the threat dealt with, Bravo remounted and continued to Oscar, where Alpha and Charlie were already clearing.
Command Bravo, we're still plus one pilot. We're broken. Contact now. Moving in vehicles. Tank, last seen moving northwest. We believe firepower kill.
Their route naturally moved them past the anticipated resupply point, and given the possible armor threats, it wasn't really sensible to ask them to come back to resupply. If they needed it, we could figure that out in the next objective. I let Logi know this, and Delta, Platoon Headquarters, and Logi withdrew and headed for Objective Oscar. As expected, Charlie finished their shorter Objective Oscar lane first. In planning for the exfil phase, I decided to use Charlie to secure an area in front of them, giving them an additional gameplay task while waiting for the other squads to finish their lanes. Having them secure this road loop would mean that I could move Alpha and Bravo through them, allowing Charlie to cover them as they displaced, then have Charlie break contact and bring up the rear of the convoy. Alpha finished their lane not long after. I held them in place for the moment, not wanting to move them to Bravo's lane unless it was necessary. And this was mostly because I didn't want Bravo to lose out on part of their planned experience. There was plenty of clearing to go around. With Alpha holding, Charlie moving up to their new secure area, and Bravo mid-clear, Orzel 2's pilot was reinforcing the battle and returned to the AO to pick up their gunner. Bravo called in with an update. They were okay on ammo, but they'd gone red on medical. I told them that Lodge was available nearby for a medical resupply, and they went ahead and coordinated that with them.
Bravo, you have an enemy squad to go south.
Alright, let's fucking
Bravo,
go.
no, it's just... So a tentacle 2 north in front of the base. Command, Bravo.
Go for command.
15 up, orange ammo, red medical. We're proceeding south along our sector now. No enemy contacts at this time.
Copy, Bravo. Lodge is directed to your east if you want to do a medical resupply with them.
Logic Bravo, be restocked. All face to face there.
After resupplying Bravo, the recovery team asked if they should stay in the area or head back to base. I told them about the vehicles they'd soon need to recover and asked them to stay around. I let Chris, the Alpha squad leader, know that they should be prepared to lead the convoy out through the Charlie secure area in the near future. This is simply to give them an opportunity to consider what they do in advance before actually having to do it.
I was just going to say, be ready to roll out through the Charlie secure shortly. We look at that ANA stuff.
Roger.
The Exfil route, we'll just have you lead it out.
At this point, Orzel 1 was shot down, but successfully auto-rotated, and Orzel 2 flew over to pick them up and return them to base.
Roger.
Please just make it clear, 1 is down, 3 is going to pick them up and RTB with them.
Naturally, as soon as they started to do this, Bravo reported several armored threats nearby, and that they were almost out of their own anti-tank weapons.
Command, Bravo, we need air support to our west. We have 1 T-55, 1 BMP west of us. We're approaching Black on Late AT.
Copy. Alpha, can you send the AT guys over to help? Air command.
Go. Hey,
Bravo needs some anti-tank support.
1, how much AT you got?
on the way.
I asked Alpha to send their AT guys over to help, then told Orzel 2 that Bravo needed their support. Next, I asked Bravo if they wanted me to send all of Alpha to help, which they agreed to, so I told Chris to go ahead and get everyone over there. Delta volunteered to help as well, since they still had AT, so I told them to go for it. In order to set the stage for our extract, I moved Logi over to the Charlie hold area, then drove our MRAP there as well. The way things were heating up, I didn't want us hanging around there much longer. I conveyed the orders.
All squads, command. It looks like it's getting pretty hot now. The intent now is to snatch that ANA vehicle, get to the Charlie secure area, and go down the Exfil route.
Bravo reached the ANA vehicles, which turned out to be 3 BMPs.
Command, Bravo, 3 times BMPs marked. We're securing the area. We'll have it secured in less than a minute.
Orzel 2 had made it back to base to get Orzel 1 that new airframe. I let them know that
Whoever gets back first, I need you scouting the Exfil route.
Roger.
Delta was now ready to grab the BMPs. I told them to go for it, then warned Charlie that they would have friendly BMPs approaching from their west shortly. Alpha had lost a vehicle, cutting their ability to transport all of their squad members.
Command, this is Alpha, reporting total loss of one of my VIC. I do not have enough room in the one VIC to carry all of us.
Fortunately, this contingency had been planned for, and I told them to send their overflow to ride with platoon headquarters. We also had BMPs that could potentially hold troops, but for now it seemed like the platoon headquarters MRAP would be sufficient. With the situation continuing to escalate by the minute, I told Delta that they were authorized to use the armaments on the BMPs from this point forward.
Delta, are those BMPs armed?
They are. Pulling off.
You guys are free to use them against the tanks and stuff.
Roger that.
Air arrived as Charlie was being approached by a tank. It was time to get Bravo and Alpha out of there. I gave the order that the convoy order would be Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, then Delta. Alpha told Bravo that they'd cover them as they withdrew, and that process began. Our Hind recon told us that the route back looked clear, but noted that there was some infantry along the way.
The route to Nowzat looks unobstructed, but there is enemy infantry southeast of Charlie. Sporadic.
I updated their tasking to have one of them covering the Charlie rally area and the route south of it, and the other assisting Alpha and Bravo in their breakout.
Copy. 1, can you continue to cover the Charlie secure area, the route south of that, and then 2 will be covering Bravo and Alpha as they extract from where they are. Right as Bravo reported being mounted and moving, Orzel 2 said they'd developed a fuel leak and would need to set down.
Bravo's mounted and moving east. Fuel leak on 3. We're
Copy
going to put
that.
down and try and repair.
They did so, and were able to do a hasty patch to stop the leak, then took off shortly after. As Bravo made it to the northern side of the Charlie hold area, Charlie warned them about heavy contact coming from the north. Meanwhile, I'd had Apache hop in his driver, with myself getting in his gunner. It was more important for us to be able to drive on short notice than shoot, and I knew I'd be busy enough in the map that having me in the driver's slot wasn't a great idea. As Alpha began to peel back, I told them to just go ahead and roll through. They were the point element, and to keep things moving, it was better to just have them drive through and get everyone else to follow them, versus having them stop and do a more deliberate organization of the convoy.
Alpha, as soon as you get there, roll through.
Ready, stop. Yeah, we're lifting. Roger, roll through.
We probably didn't have time for that. The enemy armor meant that speed was essential to survival here. Alpha 2 joined up with my vehicle, while the other vehicle headed onto the exfil route. Immediately after this, I told Bravo to start moving, while Orzel 1 reported that there were infantry showing up on our exfil route. With Alpha 2 now on board, I dropped out of the gun turret, telling them to get someone else on it. My role from here was going to be purely decision-oriented.
Get a gunner on this.
Infrared. Going.
Things were going to start happening very quickly. As Alpha passed through, Logi fell in behind them. A short distance down the road, an ambush engaged the lead Alpha vehicle and Logi, which ended up disabling Logi. As Bravo reported they were moving out, I told everyone else it was now time to go.
Copy, Bravo. Charlie falling behind us. Let's all get out of here.
Bravo, this is Alpha. A lot of contact around Logi. Alpha, turn around, turn around. Logi just got disabled.
Bravo, stay good.
Break. Logi just got disabled between Alpha and Bravo. Turn around this Vic.
Turn around,
About face.
Logi said.
Double time into the logic.
Alpha and Bravo had both seen what had happened and moved to and halted near the Logi vehicle. Charlie, still in their secure area, was in contact.
Dismount, short security around it. Around the vehicle, stay around it. Ghost Boots, I want this vehicle oriented south so we're ready to go at the fucking hat drop.
Charlie called up that they had a damaged vehicle that was slowing them down. Delta was nearby and able to provide transport, so I let them know that they should ditch vehicles that couldn't make the convoy, and get everyone loaded up into other vehicles and headed out.
Alpha 1, make room. Charlie 2 Vic is damaged and it's slow.
Turn it the fuck around.
Delta should have plenty of room as well.
Charlie, transport 4S. Charlie, work with Delta.
My Vic
Get
is, let me
dudes
see.
with them.
Can't you repair it?
Copy. If that vehicle isn't going to make it in this convoy, you can ditch it.
What's the status with Logi?
He's gonna mount up now. We waiting for Charlie, we rolling out of.
Charlie reported being mounted just as Orzel 1 reported a T-72 coming in from the west. There was actually two tanks, a T-72 headed at Alpha and Bravo, and a T-55 heading at Charlie and Delta.
T-72 northwest.
Delta should be stable on the BMP's lost track.
All vehicles can move, need to be moving now.
There is a tank on the convoy.
Yes, burning.
Lead tank.
Charlie, have your guys get the other one.
Bravo is knocked out, but there's a second one further northwest by half kilometer.
Everything was happening all at once now. Alpha and Bravo knocked out their T-72 immediately, but the T-55 ran into Delta and Charlie, who got into a knife fight with it. Alpha pushed forward. I made sure Bravo had enough lift to get out,
Do you have sufficient lift to get out of there?
Bravo, yes.
then asked for Charlie's status.
Charlie?
No response. I asked Delta.
Delta, how long are you moving?
Again, no response. I could see the Charlie fireteam markers moving, but Delta was still stationary. I needed Air's help for this.
I need you to get eyes on Delta.
Orzel 2 was hit by anti-aircraft fire and lost engine, but they auto-rotated successfully. Orzel 1 reported 2 ZU-23 trucks and began engaging them. Alpha and platoon headquarters with Laji on board were moving on the extract route. Bravo had an update about Delta.
Command, Delta elements, the BMPs are getting hit by AT, they're dismounting at this time. Friendly
Alpha, hold here. Bravo, copy.
I had Alpha halt to ensure that we didn't get too far away before we figured out what the status of Charlie and Delta actually was. Orzel 1 reported that the tank that had pushed towards Delta was now disabled. Charlie seemed like they were intact at this point. While Delta's situation was seemingly dire based on how the map looked, I had to think of the entire platoon's well-being. I wasn't going to send Alpha back unless absolutely necessary. Bravo was close enough to provide support by fire, but I also wouldn't ask him to drive back into what had become a kill zone. Charlie, closest to Delta's last known position and most familiar with what had been happening there, was the one that I'd asked for help. I needed them to figure out what had happened to Delta and get any survivors if possible.
Platoon, also one, we're seeing the friendly BMPs moving around. They had a tank on them, but it's been destroyed.
Bravo, maintain security where you are. Charlie, can you try and get the status on Delta and get them out of there?
Orzel 1 reported that there were enemy infantry on Delta's position, and they were attempting to support them with chain gun fire.
Delta has an EI on their position. We're trying to support as best.
I wanted to move Alpha into a position that could support Bravo, so I told Chris to head a bit north and hold there. This would allow them to cover the other squads as they withdrew. Bravo reported in.
Go.
Here's your sign.
Delta 1 marker, 2 friendly BMPs destroyed. I'm pushing 2 remaining BMPs south on the road, followed by Charlie, followed by my call sign.
Bravo, Charlie, and those Delta survivors were heading down the exfil route. I acknowledged.
Copy. If you guys are pretty confident you got everyone, just let's go.
If they believe they had all the survivors, they should keep going. They'd managed to repair the Laji truck as well, and were able to bring it out with them. There was still some confusion about survivors at Delta's earlier position. Charlie couldn't assess it, and Bravo lead emphasized that the elements with him needed to keep moving.
There are still people back at Delta 1 mark.
Unable to read due to the friendly air.
Are you
I am
missing
moving
one?
south on MSR.
Green T's unconscious.
Okay.
Copy. Charlie, what's your assessment of that?
Charlie cannot assess. I'm driver seat for Delta.
Charlie, Delta, Bravo, keep moving. I will take rear.
Getting Delta, Charlie, and Bravo out was significant. With them making it out, and Alpha already positioned where they were, there was still a slim possibility that I could send an Alpha team to go rescue anyone left at Delta's old position, if the helos could find something. I didn't want to risk anyone unless I knew it was actually necessary, but I also didn't want to leave until I was fairly confident that nothing more could be done. I asked Air to get eyes on that area, and let me know if anyone was still alive.
Air, can you tell if we have any survivors in the Charlie secure area?
Copy.
We see no friendly. That area is overrun by.
We continued heading back to the fob. Once there, I had everyone stand to on the western side, just in case any enemy were pursuing us.
Once people inside the fob, stand to facing west. What? I don't understand.
It was all clear. So what had actually happened with Charlie and Delta? It sounded like pandemonium, but once everyone was counted up, only one person had actually died in the chaos of it. To understand this, we need to jump back in time a bit. We're at about 2 hours and 25 minutes into the mission here, and we're rewinding about 5 minutes back to when Delta arrived at Charlie's position, right as my vehicle turned south to start the exfil. Masked from view to those on the ground, a T-55 was heading towards a rally area. As Charlie began to leave, one of their vehicles was moving slowly from previous damage, causing the crew and passengers to decide to dismount it and run over to the BMPs.
Two, we're gonna mount up in Delta Cervix, in the BMPs.
This man here.
As luck would have it,
They all piled into the first one they got to, which was Mike Papa Lima's, the Delta squad leader. Unfortunately for them, he'd lost a track to enemy fire. The other Charlie vehicle headed off as Mike hopped out to see if he could fix the track, then realized he couldn't. Behind Delta, the T-55 showed up, firing coax as the tank was bouncing towards them over rough ground. The Delta MRAPs quickly began driving away, cutting right to get out of the view of the tank. Rinzel's BMP drove forward, just out of view of the tank, as Mike's passengers began dismounting and running to his vehicle. Mike had hopped on his BMP's turret and was engaging enemy nearby, along with Rinzel and Militant, firing at an enemy squad approaching from the northeast. When Rinzel noted he had troops on board, Mike told him to get out of there, and he did so just in time.
Rinzel's big cat's friendlies inside the vehicle. Say again, friendlies with me. I'll be
Yeah, get him out, get him out.
Behind him, the T-55 crested, but was unable to traverse and press the turret quickly enough to hit the BMP before it was gone. It fired, but it missed pretty high. Simultaneously, Mike jumped out of his vehicle to try to repair it or run to another one, only to immediately get mowed down by the T-55, which he hadn't known was there. Militant, realizing that a tank was somewhere in the area, began traversing left as he was asking about it on the radio, only to find it directly beside him.
That tank still...
He quickly switched to the BMP's cannon and put a round into it at point-blank range, which ended up disabling it. A moment later, Rinzel's BMP, which had just driven a short distance away and then stopped to engage, put a missile into the turret of the T-55, forcing the crew to bail. In another wonderful example of timing, as the T-55's crew bailed out, a little fuzzy SEAL, the only remaining occupant of Mike's BMP, jumped out to see what had happened to him. The T-55's crew immediately gunned him down. Rinzel, who had bailed from his BMP to try to help Mike, who was already dead, ran over to Militant's vehicle to get a ride out.
Militant, if you're alive, I'm right near you. I think Impale's dead. I took the tank out.
Alright, go ahead.
Impale's dead, I'm gonna hop inside.
Get on that gun.
Seal had woken up and pulled himself back into the BMP just in time for Rinzel and Militant to not see him. After his vehicle took another hit, Seal got out and limped for cover, radiating to his squad that he was still up. Hearing this, the Charlie squad medic, Snuffy the Evil, rushed over to help him. Snuffy and Seal were picked up by Bravo and escorted home. Amazingly enough, only one person died in this incident. It was Mike Papa Lima, upon dismounting inadvertently into view of a T-55. Everyone else managed to make it out alive, though several were wounded. Looking back on it, there are a few things that I was particularly happy with in this scenario. Setting up the lanes and movements for the different squads over the course of the mission, combined with mixing up their objectives when possible, seemed to go over pretty well. The squad leaders were all more than capable of working with the stated intent for each objective, allowing me to spend my time looking at the bigger picture. Giving the leaders enough room to solve problems on their own, without having an overbearing platoon commander, made for a lot of solid squad leader initiative and problem solving. I was also happy with how Delta's experience seemed to go. I'd worried about them being left out of the action and had told them to let me know if that happened, but between the taskings I had for them and the challenges the admin threw at their way, they seemed to have had plenty to do. Keeping them close at hand for the last objective allowed them to contribute to our battle more directly as well. The Hinds did a good job as well, even if one of them was seemingly scared of heights. They provided timely scouting and support, and made my job easier as a result, which is always appreciated. As far as the exfiltration phase went, from a platoon leadership standpoint, this was a good example of trying to help without being overbearing or resorting to micromanagement. There was only so much I could do from where I was, and those were broad stroke things: getting air to do recon, staging Alpha nearby if assistance was needed, and making sure that we all didn't just run headfirst back into a situation that we couldn't say that we fully understood. I relied on my squad leaders, who were closer to the problem area, to figure out how to solve it, and that's exactly what they did. Bravo lead, Brix, did a particularly noteworthy job by managing the disorder and getting different vehicles to continue moving onto the exfiltration route. The individual actions of people like Militant and Rinzel helped to ensure that a bad situation didn't become much worse. From a squad perspective, the finale was an example of how squads operating close to each other can have issues with information sharing in hectic environments due to the squads being on different short-range radio nets. It's not really a problem that you can definitively solve, especially when things are as noisy and chaotic as it was here, but it's worth keeping in mind when things start to get wild. Overall, I had a great time with this, and I hope you enjoyed this episode as well. YouTube's kind of a shitty game to play, but if you'd like to help keep content like this coming, there are a few things you can do to help me out. I run a Patreon campaign for my channel, which is the most direct way to support. You can find that here. This is what funds things like the Art of Flight, Visualized TTPs, and other videos. Aside from that, the best assistance comes from spreading the word. If you know someone you think would like this, feel free to share it. And finally, if you have thoughts on what happened here,
or aspects that you particularly enjoyed, let me know in the comments. Thanks as always for the support, and until next time, take care.
Does anyone else think it's really weird that the helo that was flying 2 meters off the ground is the one that got shot down earlier?
No.
Blind coincidence.
Totally unrelated.
Unrelated.
I think the collective's broken is what's going on.
Yeah. So you can only go up by pitching up and down.